My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life. Welcome to the Duck Milk Prod YouTube channel. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and this live stream is part of a series I am calling Reading Reviews with Rebecca, because I like alliteration, which will analyze the critical reception of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice through the negative reviews written by top critics from Rotten Tomatoes, one review at a time. Now, this is not meant to belittle anyone's opinions, but rather serve as a study of art criticism and how we discuss film. I'm personally hoping that this endeavor, this project that I'm taking on, will encourage all of us, including myself, to be better consumers of cinema. This week, I will be reading through a review from the AV Club. I had it as San Diego Reader in my Google Docs, and I hesitated, but it is not the San Diego Reader. We've already covered that one. We are going to be reading from the AV Club this week. The title or headline from this one is Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is as inelegant as its title, written by A.A. Dowd. If you would like to follow along and read it for yourself, you can click on the link in the video description below, and I encourage you to do so to read it for yourself. You don't have to just trust me. You don't have to go on my word. But read it for yourself. See what you think. That's my whole thing here. Is we're analyzing things for ourselves, not relying on someone else. So please follow along if you would like to read it for yourself. And if A.A. Dowd should ever see this video, I just want to say that I'm aiming to do this as civilly and analytically as possible. And sometimes with these reviews, it's a little difficult. But I would ask that anyone watching live or posting in the comments would do the same. I'm simply taking a look at the criticism for and of BVS now from an historical point of view, given that these reviews were used by Warner Brothers in their decision-making process regarding the DC Extended Universe. Due to the poor reviews for Batman v Superman, the tone and approach to the franchise were changed for Justice League and ultimately led to the destruction of what we would consider the Snyderverse in terms of the Snyderverse story that was being told over the course of 5 films. Before I get into A.A. Dowd's thoughts, though, I'm sure there are some viewers who might think, hey, this is a film critic for a major news outlet who is included amongst the reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes. Who cares what you have to say, Rebecca? This is, what are your qualifications, Rebecca? And you know what? I'm glad you asked. I think it's a fair question to ask, and I would be asking it if I was in the viewer or the audience's position. I would ask that of myself if I was not doing the live stream. So I think it's a good question, and I'll be providing a few qualifications, I would say, of my experience, my background, and hopefully some things that I can offer in terms of analysis and discussing film, and specifically this film when we do these. So here's a little bit about me. I graduated from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with a degree in telecommunications and film and a focus on broadcast television production. While I've never been to film school, in my television and production experience, I've learned about and have lots of practice in operating cameras, shot composition, and editing. Lighting, green screen, and audio are my weak spots, admittedly, but I've been working on those. After working in local TV news, running cameras, and working in production, I got a job at Turner, now Warner Media, or whatever they're calling themselves now, for 14 years. I worked with networks, or brands as they call them now, like TBS, TNT, Adult Swim, Cartoon Network, Boomerang, True TV, and Turner Classic Movies as a video encoding specialist. I also did a fair amount of closed captioning work and DVD and Blu-ray QC. In case you are wondering how I podcasted about Supergirl and the DCEU films while working for a Time Warner company, I actually got permission and clearance from my human resources representative. If you think I wouldn't criticize stories that were under the same corporate umbrella, that was never a problem nor a concern for me. If I thought the Supergirl TV series or a DCEU film had faults, I said so. In the last 17 years, I have served as a director, technical director, and camera operator at my local church in a live production capacity. I've been a video editor for 17 years, having worked in Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere Pro CC. In my day job, I shoot and edit news and documentary-style video content that involves interviews and narrative storytelling. I'm also currently an amateur photographer and am aiming to improve my efforts in still photography. You can check out my work over at Instagram at @TheDerbyKid. Link is in the video description below. While discussing these film reviews, music and film scores will inevitably come up. It may be good to know that in my life I have played piano, handbells, clarinet, bass clarinet, bassoon, acoustic guitar, and have even started learning how to play the ukulele. I've played in marching bands, symphonic bands, and wind ensembles, and have sung in many choirs. While I don't consider myself a world-class musician, far from it, actually, I do know some things about music and am a big fan of film scores and soundtracks. In addition to my production and musical experience, I have had lots of experience in art criticism. I've been podcasting about television and film since 2009 and do so on a regular basis with Supergirl Radio, a podcast I co-host about the CW Supergirl TV series. I am also a writing contributor to the Justice League Universe podcast that offers analysis on the DCEU films. You might even hear my voice occasionally in recordings and audio commentaries over there. I'm not an expert, but I care deeply about film, television, storytelling, and art. So I hope this gives you a background on where I'm coming from. All right, now that we have gotten that out of the way, we can get straight into the review and A.A. Dowd's thoughts from the AV Club. So we'll start off with the title or the headline, however you want to refer to it. It's titled Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is as inelegant as its title, which is actually very difficult to say if you read it out loud. Maybe when you're actually just reading it inside your mind, it's not so bad. if you have to say it or speak it, it's not very elegant itself. So the review title may be inelegant when you're saying it out loud, but maybe that's just me. Maybe that's my difficulty in reading these things. But I will give this title some credit. It's actually trying to be creative. Some of these other titles are a little lame or just kind of putting in the bare amount of effort. This one's at least trying to take its own spin on things and trying to be a little different. So there is some creativity that is going towards the title. And more importantly, what I think is fascinating about this one is that it's meta. It's a title about a title. And to be fair to the film, though, I will defend the lengthy title, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, because from what I gathered from watching interviews, it always sort of sounded like Zack Snyder was asked to add the Dawn of Justice part to it. If I remember correctly, and please, someone in the live chat or in the comments, please fact check me on this. I recall an interview where Snyder said that he added Dawn of Justice because the studio wanted something more. I guess they didn't just want to have Batman v Superman. So he just kind of came up with it kind of on the fly, how about Dawn of Justice? Because that's kind of that's what happens in the film, is that the Justice League is starting to form, and there is a dawn when that happens. So I that's how I remember it. But maybe my memory is going. But I seem to recall that Zack Snyder was sort of asked to add something to the title, so that was his best effort coming up with that. So it is a little long and clunky. I will admit to that. I think the title is maybe a little too long. Maybe you don't always need a colon in the the title. I would probably have tried to name it something different, or maybe just stuck to Batman v Superman. I think that's all you really need. But the title, even though it is long and clunky, it actually uh, accurately reflects and represents what the film is about. Batman and Superman do go up against each other. The V in the title indicates a trial of some kind, and there is a Senate hearing that Superman attends, and the Justice League does start to form at the end of it. So there is that. So at least uh because of the title, it's actually telling you what is actually happening in the film. It's not like it's saying something that you go into and you're like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I was going to use the Batman as a as a title, as an example of if AA Dowd has a problem with this title, I really can't wait to read the review of just the Batman. That's there is such a thing as maybe being too long, and then maybe too complicated, and then there is also being too simple. I think there's already a TV series that was called The Batman. So this is kind of not very creative. They I guess went the other way. At least Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice was unique, and it tells you what the film is about. The Batman doesn't really tell you much, and is pretty pretty lazy. But that's funny to me. I do think another good example of a crazy uh, title of something. And I was going to share my screen just because I started to watch this weekend. Um, is that there is a Netflix miniseries that has a pretty wild title. It's called "The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window," and I love that title so much. So there's something to be said. It might be long and might be a little clunky, and I'm never going to remember the order of all those things. But I find it delightful and endearing, because I think it's basically a parody of a this kind of miniseries where there's a lot of drama to it. So I think that the title is actually supposed to be hilarious and goofy. But so there's an example of something that is long and complicated, but it pays off. And I've always said that I could come or go with a title. The title matters less to me than the actual film. I really just want to see what's at the first frame until the last frame of the film. That's all I really care about. So you could title it whatever you wanted to. But I think there's some, fair criticism to the Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice title, but I really it's not that big of a deal to me. Um, but it is funny that it's being mentioned here. Let's see. I'm going to go into the chat because there is some chat about the title. David says it's inelegant if you, and that includes myself back then, thought V. Don't you mean versus? Yeah, there is a big difference there, and I think a lot of people will say versus, but that's not technically what it is in the title. And I think that V is very intentional. And so that's that people say I've heard people talk about the legality of the title, and how the first person in the title of a court trial is the person bringing the case against someone else. So Batman is bringing the case against Superman to him. So that actually has some meaning. Let's see. Andy says, "I had no idea about the Dawn of Justice was something WB asked for." Yeah, I can't remember exactly what interview it was, But I do recall that Zack Snyder said that he just kind of had to add something to it. So if I ever come across it again, I'll let you know. But if somebody remembers that and has the link for it ready to go, drop me a comment in the comment section. Let's see. And then David says, Amy Adams was the woman in the window. Yeah, that's a different fictional story. The woman in the window is not quite the same as the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window. That's a different thing. Although I hope Amy Adams shows up in this thing. I've been watching the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window. I'm only on like episode 4 or 5, so I've got a couple episodes left. So maybe Amy Adams does show up. We'll see. I know this is we're doing a Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice review live stream, but the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window has been hilarious to watch, because it's one of those things where they play it. I think it's a parody. I think it is. But the trick to the parody is to play it completely straight. Like you're taking it totally serious, and then you do something that every now and then you're like, was that supposed to be funny? Because that was funny to me. Was this supposed to be funny? I don't know if it was supposed to be funny or not. So I recommend it. It's been kind of funny to watch so far. So I'm invested. So I'm gonna hopefully finish it this week sometime. But I just thought that was a funny title, and I thought I would throw it in the title discussion. All right, continuing on in the review. Let's see. So I don't know if A.A. Dowd is going to have a problem with the title of the Batman. So keep your eye on that to see what A.A. Dowd thinks of that title. If A.A. Dowd is going to critique the title of the Batman, we'll see. But going on back into the review, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, as any 10-year-old comics nut can attest, pitting the biggest household names in superheroism against each other has never made much logical sense. Being the world's greatest detective doesn't count for much in a fist fight with someone faster than a speeding bullet and more powerful than a locomotive, unquote. Well, this first paragraph doesn't even know what it's talking about. Pitting Batman against Superman doesn't make any logical sense. It's been done many times in the comics, and it seems to always make sense, because there are ways to amplify Batman's strength and abilities, and it's also something that they can do to decrease Superman's abilities, which often is used with kryptonite. A lot of times writers will have kryptonite being used on Superman so that Batman can't do something to Superman. But that's all you got to do. Use kryptonite. Boom. Sense is made. And that's exactly what happens in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, is that Batman creates the ability to depower Superman using the kryptonite spear and the kryptonite that he steals from Lex Luthor. So that logically makes sense to me. So I don't know what A.A. Dowd is talking about here. Continuing on, the reviewer writes, quote, no, the showdown only works if you consider what these iconic characters, the shining stars of the DC Comics stable, like with horses, the DC Comics stable really represent. They're the perfect inverse of each other, a beaming beacon of mankind's promise going toe-to-toe with the dank underbelly of its fears. And that's where Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice first runs into trouble, when the last son of Krypton seems every bit as anguished, as edgily dark as the Dark Knight himself. What's the point in bashing them together? Their conflict isn't so much day versus night, to quote the bad guy, as, quote, late evening versus slightly later evening, unquote. I have some questions. What does edgily dark mean in terms of Henry Cavill's Superman? What makes him edgily dark? Is it that he has doubts about what he's doing? especially having doubts about what he's doing and how he's accomplishing things after a bomb goes off killing people at the United States Capitol and he couldn't stop it. Is that the problem, that he's questioning the role of Superman and his ability as a hero? Is he not allowed to have those emotions and those feelings and that emotional journey? Is that something that Superman can't do? Is it that he's listening to the world and what the world is saying about him and he has an internal struggle about it? Should Superman not be concerned about those things? Should he not wonder what he's, if he's doing something that's helping humanity, or if it's causing more harm than good that he's out there doing things? Is that what makes him edgily dark? To me, I just think that's being a character. I actually, and this is it, I really wish I had more of a memory of when these interviews take place. But I know there is an interview out there with Deborah Snyder, who responded to the criticism of these films being dark. And she was like, "No, you're just going through something. It's not that you're intending to be dark. It's that you're just being put through the ringer for something." And I agree with Debbie Snyder. I 100% think that is like on point. She definitely knows what she's talking about. So I agree with Deborah Snyder on that it's not so much dark as it's just putting a character through something so that they have to have a journey, so that they have to go somewhere and grow from something. So I don't understand why people think that Superman can't have problems, or that he can't question himself, that he can't have doubts. That actually makes Superman more relatable to me, and that is what makes him interesting. I don't think the Superman who does everything right all the time and has all the answers and does it with a smile and a wink, I don't find that very interesting. In fact, I actually kind of think that's a little insulting. So I'm actually okay with an edgily dark Superman, whatever that means. So I do have a question about that. And then in that paragraph, it criticizes Batman and Superman being the inverses of each other. Well, in BVS, they are inverses of each other. Superman's out there trying to do the right things. He's trying to help the world when it's in trouble, when people are trapped in a flood, or when somebody's just stuck in a like a house fire. He goes to the Senate hearing because it's the right thing to do. Even those people are criticizing him and wanting to condemn him, he goes anyway so that he can speak to the people. Batman, on the other hand, is driven by revenge and anger and wanting to murder Superman. So he doesn't have the best of intentions, Batman, in that film. So I think they actually are inverses of each other in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. So I think it actually works pretty well. Maybe not in the way A. Dowd wanted it to happen, but they were still inverses anyway. After this, I'm going to hop into the chat. Let's see. There's some comments about the the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window. David says the title is blatant parody to begin with. It's like the Garfield and Friends 50s monster film parody about the thing in the fridge next to the jam and behind the coleslaw. See, those are great titles. I love those titles. So good stuff. I would actually watch that. I'll have to go back and watch that. Guy used to love Garfield and Friends. Oh, good stuff. Let's see. And David also brings up how Batman could fight Superman, saying even in World's Finest, the cartoon three-parter from, if I remember correctly, Superman the animated series, Batman judo throws Superman across the room, Superman throws him back, and then Batman flexes and dominates with a kryptonite pebble. So yeah, kryptonite comes in handy. So that is a way to do that. Kryptonite is, a good standby. But I think also what BBS did well, and I think what the Dark Knight Returns did well, is they gave Batman an armored suit, so that helps him a little bit more with strength and protection. So that aids him in addition to kryptonite. All right, going back into the review, A. Dowd writes, quote, "Directed by Zack Snyder of faithfully butchered Watchmen fame," unquote. Already got a lot of questions about this section. It's not even a full sentence, and I have so many questions. Okay, so why refer to Watchmen as, quote, butchered, unquote? Is this saying that A.A. Dowd thought Zack Snyder botched making the film? Because as far as I understand it, most people think that Zack Snyder filmed the unfilmable film. Most people, Watchmen was kind of passed around and passed around because they thought it could not be filmed. They could not be put to film. And Zack Snyder actually achieved what people thought was impossible. He filmed the unfilmable and brought it to the screen. So he actually succeeded in bringing it to life in a fairly faithful way. He might have changed the ending a little bit, but for the most part, I think he captured the look and the tone and the story of what the emotions of what's going on in the graphic novel. So I would say that most people think that the film was a success. And even now, 10 years later, I noticed that people were writing think pieces about how actually Watchmen is very underrated. So people are coming around to it, even if they didn't like it when it first came out. People are now, with time and reflection, are seeing it in a new light. So I don't think that's quite the answer to why A.A. Dowd would refer to Watchmen as butcher. That can't be it. Is it referring to how the film was shortened in length? Maybe it's talking about how, as a butcher, you might be cutting something up. So maybe it's referring to the several cuts of the film, because there's the director's cut, there's the theatrical cut, there's the ultimate cut. So maybe it's referring to the cuts of the film. I don't know. Is it saying that the film bungled the adaptation of the story? I don't know. I mean, the biggest, most notable change from the comic to the film is the way Vite plans on destroying the world. But even that, to me, is a really good change. Of what he kind of plans to do. In the comic involves like a big giant squid, and in the film adaptation, he sort of uses Dr. Manhattan in a way to make that come to fruition. So to me, the film actually makes it less hokey and makes great use of Dr. Manhattan and sort of plays on his emotional capacity, even though he doesn't. Dr. Manhattan is a really complicated character because he seems like a character who doesn't have emotion, but I think he does a little bit, especially in the way they play him in the film. So it can be that butchered would refer to bungling the adaptation of the story, because I think it actually did a really good job. Maybe A.A. Dowd is saying it was butchered by critics. Maybe the film was butchered by critics and they gave it a bad score. But even then, I don't know if that's true, because I looked on Rotten Tomatoes and it currently shows a 65% critic score and a 71% audience score. So that's pretty good for a Zack Snyder film. It wasn't outright hated. In fact, those percentages, even though I don't like to really acknowledge percentages, because I don't like that we in this current age boil films down to a percentage. Uh, it's pretty good. I mean, Zack Snyder films have been taking a lot of heat, but Watchmen is fairly good though. So it's received pretty well by both critics and audiences. So I have no idea why A.A. Dowd referred to Watchmen as butchered. Faithfully butchered Watchmen fame. I have no idea what that's about. So if anybody wants to fill me in on those thoughts about that, that would be great. I would be interested in hearing it. I'm going to keep going. A.A. Dowd writes, quote, Batman v Superman takes a title fight kids of all ages have been speculating about for decades. Costume titan from the cosmos, most costume vigilante from the city, and invest it with all of the fun of a protracted custody battle, unquote. Ah, yes, the argument that BVS is no fun. This is an original argument that no one has ever used ever in the history of film criticism. So this is just a unique take on the film. But to me, and I say that with all the criticism that I can muster, all the facetiousness that I can express, because if you don't have a good time watching the Batman versus Superman fight, I honestly don't know what to tell you. seeing Superman throw Batman through the bat signal. I mean, he throws him right into the bat signal, and I was like, that's awesome. So that was pretty fun for me to see them duke it out and fight, and to see it, result in Batman literally tossing the kitchen sink over top Superman's head. And Superman, coming off the kryptonite, and Batman realizing that he can't punch him anymore. That's awesome stuff. I don't know how anybody could not have fun watching that, but everybody's a little different, I guess. So A.A. Dowd did not have a good time watching the big fight, but I sure enough still did. Though I will say, perhaps here, just to try and understand A.A. Dowd's point, maybe the fun is referring to the entire film and not just the Batman Superman fight. And if that's correct, I think this goes back to a fundamental misunderstanding of how and why BVS was made. It wasn't supposed to be like Marvel movies that critics and audiences were used to at the time. Marvel was having a very long string of successes at the box office in the way that they had cultivated their films. But BVS was not meant to be like that. Zack Snyder understood, and I think still does, that WB and the DC films have their own kind of brand, which is a little more serious, a little more respectful to the material and the characters, and really trying to dig in a little deeper into those characters. Whereas the MCU is more popcorn flick, having a good time, quirky, witty banter. That's kind of their brand. So it wasn't, BBS was not made to be that. It was written, shot, and made to be a little more dramatic, a little more serious take on these characters and the world of DC. In absolutely no way was it obligated to be fun. So that's just A.A. Dowd throwing expectations on a film that did not have those expectations on itself to begin with. So I don't think that that is fair. But as I said, on a personal note, I have a lot of fun watching BVS. That's I guess everybody's fun is a little different, but I don't know what kind of fun A.A. Dowd wanted BVS to be or to have. So that's just I guess that kind of part of it is kind of I like to think that art is both objective and subject in different ways. Objective and subjective. In this instance, I think it's subjective because maybe some people find it fun and some other people don't. But I think it's pretty fun. All right, I'm gonna go into the chat and just see if there's anything going on. Yeah, Andy says Batman BVS not fun. I've never heard that one before. Yeah, it's such a lame criticism because I don't know what are you expecting? What do you want it to be? I have so much fun watching the Batmobile chase. I have fun watching Lois Lane investigate things. I have fun like just digging into the themes of the film, even if it's not action packed or it's not jokey. I love just watching a great film, and that's what's fun for me. So I have a good time with that. So that's kind of what I enjoy. Andy also says, to those who always say BBS has no fun, Andy says, I'm tired of this notion that to have fun equals hilarious one-liners, whereas I had fun seeing epic comic book fights be brought to life. Yeah, that's kind of where I am, is that my fun is just watching a great film. I just like watching a great film with great cinematography and good acting and an intriguing story. That's what's fun for me. I actually find the one-liners very boring. I find that so generic. So I guess it's just kind of what's your taste for movies and film. And so I think A.A. Dowd is more of a wanting to, I guess there's an expectation that if it's about comic book characters, it's supposed to be a certain way. But who says it has to be a certain way? Nobody is obligated to make these films in any kind of certain way. So I think it's unfair, and it's unnecessary as a reviewer, because you're not really meeting the piece of art where it is. And I think that's what I always try to do, kind of look at what is the film's objective, what is the film trying to do, and did it accomplish that? And that's going to be different for an MCU movie versus Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. It just is. They're going to set out to accomplish different things and have different objectives as to what they want to be. And I don't think it's fair to judge it for something else. Some other opinion or expectation that you put onto the film. All right, continuing on, A. Dowd writes, quote, "It's a direct sequel to Snyder's equally dour Man of Steel," unquote. Lots of questions here. Why is Man of Steel dour? Because it's a serious take on Superman? Because it forces Superman to make a difficult choice? Because it didn't turn up the saturation levels to your satisfaction? Uh, I don't know. I'm just asking questions. There's no actual description about why Man of Steel is equally dour. It sounds this is again another example of A. Dowd putting expectations on these films, whereas Man of Steel is supposed to be Zack Snyder's take on the story and being his interpretation of what Superman's origin would be. And there was a certain reason why he picked the color palette that he did, the way he picked the way the cameras were operated, and just the overall look. There's a reason that he did everything he did. He didn't just like do it and that's oh, it just so happened to look like this, or it just so happened to be cut together this way. He thought about, I mean, Zack Snyder cares a lot about what kinds of lenses he uses, what the colors are going to be looking like, how it's going to be presented. So I would think that a professional film critic would see those things, would look at the color palette, would look at the camera operation and the techniques there, and say, "Well, why did Zack Snyder?" Instead of saying, "Oh, I don't like it," asking the question why will get you much further in an analysis. Why did Zack Snyder use this camera technique? Why did he use the color palette that he did for Superman? Why did he put Superman in this situation where he's going to have to kill Zod? Why? I think every great film critic should just ask the question, why? Because that's going to lead you to some answers. I'm gonna stop here and address Andy's comment. They said, "What about Man of Steel? How can one say that it is the deepest complex take on Superman we've ever had in cinema? Something that challenges us and lets us really be captured." Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree. Let's see. Going on with A. Dowd's review, writing, quote, "It's a direct sequel to and I'm just kind of recapping the previous sentence. It's a direct sequel to Snyder's equally dour Man of Steel, meaning that we're stuck in the same off-putting Superman, played by Henry Cavill, who leveled Metropolis, snapped the neck of his enemy, and basically made out with his sweetheart on Ground Zero," unquote. Uh, I don't know how this became a Man of Steel review, and it's going to continue. I'm just going to warn everyone. This is not the end of A. Dowd's Man of Steel thoughts in this Batman v Superman review. But we're still talking about Man of Steel. So just to address some of these points, technically Zod is the reason for most of that destruction. And even then, they didn't level all of Metropolis. It was just a certain section of Metropolis. Superman did snap the neck of his enemy, though. The one thing I noticed here, though, is A. Dowd fails to explain why Superman snapped Zod's neck. He actually did it to save a family of 4 and stop the destruction that this reviewer is so concerned about. Superman does everything he can do to stop General Zod and Man of Steel, and the next snap was the last resort. That seems like something that would be important to mention in the review, but A. Dowd just wants to paint Superman in a very negative light. I will agree, though, that the location and timing of the Superman Lois Lane kiss in Man of Steel is not the best. I also take issue with the dialogue in that moment. It's like the biggest gripe I have with Man of Steel is that dumb dialogue about kissing a human. It doesn't make any sense, and it makes everything look terrible and seem terrible in regards to the characters. They could have just kissed and not said anything, and it would be better. But when taken into context, though, of the sequence of events, Superman and Lois thought that the threat was over, and they were relieved that they had survived. And they had been kind of, I think, developing a thing for each other over the course of the film. And I think it's a natural thing that they would be so relieved that they would kiss. That makes sense to me. I had issues with the dialogue there, but other than that, I think it's fine. But of course, A.A. Dowd does not give you the context as a reader here for that. So it just makes that seem terrible and negative without actually understanding the context of the Man of Steel sequence in which Superman and Lois kiss. So continuing on with this Man of Steel review inside the BBS review, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, "It's hard to learn the value of human life when your late foster father, moral compass of the previous movie, suggests that protecting your secret identity may be more important than saving a busload of drowning children," unquote. Oh boy. Okay. So the point of that conversation with Jonathan Kent and young Clark Kent in Man of Steel is that Clark uh, is going to have to make difficult decisions. And sometimes maybe he might have to make the decision that he can't save people or that he shouldn't save people, that he's ultimately going to have to make those difficult decisions on his own. Jonathan doesn't know. He doesn't have all the answers. He's just a human man who's having to raise this super alien who has all these powers. He doesn't know all the answers. So he's trying to teach Clark that maybe sometimes he's going to have to make these decisions and they're not going to be great. That, it's not going to be something that he's always going to have the easy answer to. But he's going to have to make tough choices on whether or not to help somebody. And this actually is foreshadowing to what happens with General Zod at the end. This all culminates, this whole conversation culminates in the fact that he might have to let some people die, like General Zod. Sometimes it's going to be easy to know that decision is correct, like with the busload of children. That's an easy answer for Superman, for young Clark Kent. Of course, he should save those kids on the bus. But sometimes it's going to get a little more complicated for Superman, especially with General Zod. Does he leave him alive if he's just going to continue to kill people and cause all this destruction? Or does he just end the threat? Those are decisions that police officers do every day. And it's a tough decision. And sometimes you just have to make those kinds of hard, difficult choices when you're a hero in those positions where you're having to deal with someone who is causing crime or death or murder. Sometimes that's just one of those decisions that you're going to have to decide. And that's something that Superman, in every iteration of the character, is going to have to deal with, is these difficult choices. Now, the maybe that Jonathan Kent gives Clark in that scene, I think, is more akin to an I don't know. The whole conversation is, Clark asking, "What am I supposed to do? Just let him die?" And Jonathan responds with maybe. And that's like I said, pointing to the fact that Superman can't save everyone, and that there are some instances like with Zod that letting them die might be the right thing to do. So this whole conversation is a father trying to guide his alien son with superpowers the best way he knows how. There's no guide on how to raise your super alien son. So he's trying to figure it out with Clark. So he's trying to do the best he can with the advice that he knows to give. So A.A. Dowd neglects to mention that young Clark Kent did save the busload of drowning children. He did make the right decision in that moment. Even when he had to make a tough decision, he indeed made the right one there. So that would maybe be something that would be important to include in the review, A.A. Dowd, but it's not there. So somehow this review turned into a Man of Steel review, but I think that's the end of it now. Hopping into the chat, Andy says, "I am so fed up with the criticism about Jonathan's approach to Clark. I must have missed the How to Raise a Kryptonian course during high school." Yeah, they don't write books on that. So Martha and Jonathan had to figure it out as they went along. And I think a lot of the time, Jonathan Kent is portrayed as this all-knowing, perfect answers every time. He always knows everything. He's the wisest man on earth. But I like the idea that Jonathan Kent struggles with it sometimes, that he is just trying to give Clark the best advice that he knows how. And he's just trying to raise Clark in a way that's truthful and honest about things, because it just, in reality, Superman's not going to be able to save everybody. He's going to have to make tough choices. And in BBS, we even see that sometimes he makes the right decision, like going to the Senate hearing. But even then, there's certain things that he can't do. He can't always save people. In the instance that Lex puts the bomb in the lead casing so that Superman can't see through it. That's not the fault of Clark for not saving those people. It's that he couldn't. So there are some instances where Superman's just not in the ability to do it. So I think it's an expectation that we as the audience put on Superman sometimes, that he has to save everyone and he always has to make the right decision. And it's just not a realistic reality. They're just, sometimes he can't. Adam says in the chat, I always took that maybe as an I don't know. No one knows. The consequences of using superpowers are beyond human ability to predict. Yeah, I kind of think that's the case, because there's no way that Jonathan could say, yeah, you absolutely have to save everyone. Well, what if that everyone is a homicidal guy who wants to turn Earth into Krypton, and he wants to murder people who don't agree with him? Like, what do you do in that situation? And one who wants to heat vision and murder a family of four. You might have to think about that a little more in terms of your actions. So I think that's kind of what Jonathan was trying to say, is that I don't know, maybe, I don't have all my answers. That's basically what Jonathan Kent is saying. He's not saying you got to murder everybody. He's just saying I don't know. I don't know. And I think the I don't know is a confession that he, as Jonathan, is not going to be put in that situation, and he's not going to have to make those decisions. That's going to be something Clark is going to have to think about. And the good thing for Clark, though, is that he tends to do the right thing. And I think that's what the great thing about his portrayal of the characters, that even if it's tough, even if it's a hard decision to make, he does the right thing as best as he can. So I like that about his portrayal. All right, continuing on with A.A. Dowd's review of BVS. Just as a reminder, we're reviewing BVS here. You wouldn't know that in this review. It's mostly a Man of Steel critique, even though I'm sure you could do that in another review. But continuing on, quote, not to be outdone, BVS mangles the principles of its new principle, which is spelled differently. The first principle is LES, and the second one is PAL. So different uses of principle there. Here we have a Batman played by Ben Affleck with a slightly more flexible stance on guns and murder. He's introduced literally branding his insignia on a sex trafficker, a mark, we're told, that will get the criminal killed in prison, unquote. A.A. Dowd is doing it again, not giving context as to why Batman has a different characterization in this particular film. I know there are certain instances where the reviewers don't want to spoil things, don't want to give away the plot or spoilers for things, but this seems like a case where you might want to give a little further context for this, because when you're reading it, or at least when I'm reading this, it comes across as, oh, Batman is just such a terrible guy. But when you realize that he's coming from a place of revenge and anger, and he's trying to get to find out how he can murder Superman, that puts him in a different context. It puts his character arc in a different context. There will be some context coming up in the review, but I don't think that this section does enough when it's talking about Batman. Because Bruce, is driven by revenge about what he witnessed during the Battle of Metropolis. And he's also suffered a lot of loss. He's suffered the death of his parents right in front of him. just to remind everybody, I know everybody talks about not wanting to see the Waynes being murdered again, but I think we often forget this. As a child, his parents were murdered right in front of him. That's a pretty big deal. So let's not forget that while we talk about Bruce. Um, he also suffered a death of a Robin that we find out in BVS, murdered by the Joker. That's a pretty big deal. So he's dealing with that. He spoke to one of his employees on the phone right before his employee died. That's a pretty big deal. So he lost a lot of people in Metropolis. And with that loss comes fear and paranoia. And he's afraid that Superman could turn on the entire world and there would be nothing that anyone could do. They lay that out very well in BVS in terms of Bruce and Batman's motivation for why he's doing what he's doing against Superman. And I think it's a motivation that makes a lot of sense. So continuing on, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, "Why are the world's finest clawing at each other's capes and cowls? The smartest move made by returning screenwriter David S. Goyer in The New Ringer, Chris Terrio of Argo, is building the movie around the collateral damage of Man of Steel's climax, restaged from the ground level perspective of Gotham's playboy with a secret, Bruce Wayne," unquote. I'm glad that some of these top critics can recognize the genius that is the sequence of Bruce Wayne seeing and being in amongst the destruction of Metropolis. It gives Bruce's character meaning and motivation, and it's a nice tie into Man of Steel, and it's a great way to see what was happening from the human perspective. We see a lot of that fight between Superman and Zod, between them and what's going with them. But it's nice to be able to see that actual perspective of somebody who was on the ground watching all of this unfold. We see that a little bit with Lois in Man of Steel, but to see it with someone who doesn't know what the heck is going on, that's a different perspective. And so I'm glad that these top critics at least are objective enough to recognize that. Continuing on, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, "While the world debates how to sanction the god that can turn their cities to rubble, in the kind of Senate hearings that superhero movies now use to situate their scenarios in reality," and puts that in quotes, "an angrier than usual Batman stews about his alien rival's dangerous power. Of course, it takes a nudge to get these two to real blows, and that comes from the film's cokehead millennial version of Lex Luthor, a jittery, babbling Jesse Eisenberg, apparently determined to out-ham both Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey," unquote. Seriously? Out-ham Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey? I don't think those are even close to being the same thing. Gene Hackman's Lex has that really goofy musical theme that I think is maybe more so in line with Otis's musical theme, but it plays every time that Lex is around. So Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor is supposed to be the greatest criminal mastermind of all time, but everything he does is kind of bumbly. It's kind of over the top and bumbly. He has different kinds of wigs for different kinds of occasions, and he fails at like everything. And I find that so campy and over the top. And then when you take a look at Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor, who's sort of supposed to be like a continuation of Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, Kevin Spacey has a goofy sidekick too. This time it's not Otis, but it's Kitty Kowalski, who I love Parker Posey, but I mean, let's just be honest, she's a little goofy in that and Superman Returns. So Lex Luthor in BVS, while sometimes I will say he's a little over the top. He's very dramatic. He likes to go on top of rooftops and have conversations about philosophy. He's a little over the top, but the great thing about Lex Luthor in BVS is that you get to see his mental decline, is if you want to call it that he starts off as kind of, you can understand where he's coming from, and then he just continues to slide down into crazy town. And that's what I love about his character journey, is that you see him start to really lose it. And he's a very serious character who has serious motivations and takes serious actions, and the consequences are very, very serious of those actions. So I don't see him as out-hamming anybody close to Gene Hackman and Kevin Spacey. I think those are much, much hammier. But maybe that's just me. Let's see. I'm going to hop into the chat here real quick. Let's see. Yeah, Andy makes a good point that I think is something that I've thought about sometimes. Andy says, you know what I think those haters did? They didn't actually see the movie, but they just saw that part of the trailer that was edited out of context. Sometimes I do wonder, do they actually watch the film? Because sometimes when I'm reading these reviews, I'm like, there's no way you would write this if you'd actually watched the film. It explains everything. Sometimes I wonder if they maybe skipped out on the film and then they had a deadline. They were like, "Oh, let me just watch the trailer and assume things about it and just write what I think it was gonna do based on the trailer." Sometimes I do, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I do think that maybe they just, like, sort of did the cliff notes, like you're writing an English paper in high school and you didn't actually read the book that you're supposed to write about, but you kind of scan cliff notes real quick and then you write what you thought it was going to be about, but it's very clear you didn't actually read the book. Sometimes I do. I agree, Andy. Sometimes sometimes I do wonder about that. Let's see. And Adam says, I always found that sequence very emotional. I think referring to Bruce seeing the Battle of Metropolis happen at the beginning of BBS. Adam says, Bruce saving the girl and hearing her mother was killed. Um, yeah, I think that is a great way to really set Bruce off. He's already had to deal with the destruction. He's already had to try to save people on the ground. He's already probably known that the people in his building are dead. And the idea that this little girl has lost her mother, that impacts Bruce on a really deep personal level because I think he identifies with a little kid who loses his mother, and that's a big theme throughout the film. I know people make fun of the Martha moment, but I think that's something that I think a lot of us, I know, and maybe I can't speak for everybody. I'm trying not to speak for everybody, and I always catch myself when I do it. But that's something that I would take personally, whether it be your mother or your father. Those kinds of personal connections are very impactful. And I've lost my father, and that's anytime I see a story where they're talking about fathers and daughters specifically. That's why I'm such a big fan of Veronica Mars. I'm really protective of the relationship that Veronica has with her father. And it's something that I think if Bruce saw another little kid lose a mother, that really impacted him, and it was just kind of the thing that just teetered him over the edge. He was already dealing with so much. He was already kind of on the edge, but I think that tipped him over. I think that really did it. So that's a really great point, Adam. All right, going back into the review, A. Dowd writes, quote, running the length of about 7 Batman the Animated Series episodes, unquote. And I just wanted to stop here and make the comment that I love the idea that A. Dowd, I like the idea, I like imagining that A. Dowd is sitting down to write this review and gets out a calculator and calculates how many Batman animated series episodes BBS would be. I just like imagining that, and I wanted to mention that. At least I'll have to give A. Dowd credit here. At least this is a new way to complain about the runtime of this film. Uh, and even though the runtime of this film is actually kind of on par for most most films these days, but at least I guess this is a creative way to complain about the runtime, which is actually not that bad. I've seen runtimes that be way longer. Continuing on, A. Dowd writes, quote, Batman v Superman choppily races through the plot as the film works in a CIA cover-up, a discovered lump of kryptonite, a downed UFO, the body of Michael Shannon's slain General Zod, glib echoes of real-world terrorism, and a second villain whose identity shouldn't be disclosed, unquote. Yeah, that all happens and exists in the film. All of those things happened. And all of those things make sense within the story. When you read that paragraph, or again, I shouldn't say you, when I read that paragraph, it makes BBS sound so negative because it tried to do so many things. But those things are actually part of the plot. Those are things that tie in together, that make sense. So the criticism there, I think, is really unfair because those are things that actually tie together very nicely. A. Dowd goes on to say, quote, relationships have no room to blossom or even reveal themselves. What it's like, one must wonder, to date a being from beyond the stars. The New Adventures of Lois and Clark spent 4 seasons answering that question, while Batman v Superman can barely spare the single scene necessary to explain that Kal-El, aka Superman, aka Clark Kent, is now living with Lois Lane, played by Amy Adams, who the film keeps sending on strictly expository Daily Planet assignments, unquote. It's so unfair to compare 4 seasons of a television show and a 2 hour and 2.5 hour film. That's so unfair because in television, you have much more room to be able to explore those things, to dive deep into those things. So I don't understand why you would compare a TV show and a film. It's not even the same medium. So right off the top, I think it's unfair to do. But even so, I think BVS does a good job to show that Clark and Lois are living together. That shows a progression in their relationship. We do find out towards the beginning of the film that it's been 18 months. So we know time has passed. They've spent time together. They've obviously been dating. They've now moved in together. It's a progression of their relationship. So it tells us right there that they're comfortable enough to to hop into the bathtub together. So we know things are pretty serious. Um, we know that they are in a full blown romantic relationship. They're not just friends. They're actually in a relationship where they love each other. And I don't know. I think, we know that they're close enough that Clark has a little bit of a nickname for her. He calls her Lo instead of just Lois. So I personally think that this is enough time enough done in the story in the film and with the characters to show us that there has been a progression of their relationship. Even to the point at the end of the film, we find out that Clark wanted to proposed to Lois. He wanted to marry Lois. I think that speaks, there's a lot of little things that tell us a lot about their relationship that we don't have to, I personally don't think it has to be spelled out for me. I can assume things about their relationship based on what we're given and based on the closeness that they have with each other. So I think it actually does a good job of getting us to that point. And I don't know what A. Dowd wants. I don't know what more the film could do to help explain and go into that relationship anymore, because I think it actually does a really good job. Also, strictly expository assignments. Did A. Dowd not pay attention to the plot and what Lois is doing in the film? Those assignments that Lois goes on in BVS are extremely important. So important. Her finding the bullet in Africa leads her to go on an investigation to find out who is framing Superman and ultimately who killed people in Africa and Washington, D.C. So there's some really big events that Lois is investigating and trying to figure out what happened. Lois is the reason that Lex Luthor gets arrested in the end. She tells him to his face on that rooftop that she has proof of what he's done. So I don't know. I would say that that's maybe a little more than just strictly expository. I think what she does is extremely important to the overall plot of the film and to her as a character. Lois in BVS is one of the greatest characters of the film. She's doing so many cool things, and especially in the ultimate cut of the film, she does even more investigation. And I think she's such an important part of the film. So to diminish her like that, I think is very unfair from A. Dowd. It's another example of did A. Dowd actually watch this film? I'm not convinced. Let's see. Hopping into the chat, Adam says, so the movie is too long, but there's no time to develop relationships. That was like within the same paragraph. I know. It's hard to reconcile these statements sometimes. Okay, continuing on. I think we're maybe halfway through this review, so we might have to speed it up here. Okay. So where was I? Okay. So continuing on, A. Dowd writes, far too much time has been reserved for laying Justice League groundwork, including shoehorned appearances by ageless Amazonian and future team player Wonder Woman, played by Gal Gadot. Far too much time. I think Diana Prince in this film was in it the right amount. She's in it enough to establish a relationship with Bruce Wayne, to fight and team up with Superman and Batman, and to realize the importance and the necessity of forming the Justice League. She's not shoehorned in it, and the film doesn't spend more time on her than it needs to. It does what it needs to do with Diana, and then it backs away. So I think she's in it the appropriate amount, and I think she does a good job to push towards that dawn of justice. And let's see, let's keep going in the review. Quote, in Dawn of Justice, Supes and Bats aren't so different. They're both moody dudes with responsibility complexes, anxiety about their legacies, and in what becomes an amusingly pivotal plot point, mothers named Martha, unquote. It almost comes across in this section as if Superman and Batman are both well-rounded characters and have emotional journeys that both pay off at the end of the film. I mean, it's as if they actually have flaws and they actually have a way to grow as characters. Oh my gosh. Oh, I can't believe somebody would write a character like that. All right, continuing on. Quote, they're also both epic bores. As played again by Cavill, who has the square-jawed look but not the heroic touch, Superman comes across like a smugly sociopathic deity. Faced with his chilly blank arrogance, one can't help but long for the charismatic decency of a Christopher Reeve, or even the more puppyish charm of one-timer Brandon Routh, unquote. You know, this is another example of how I'm not so sure if A.A. Dowd actually watched the film. Are we sure? Are we 100% sure that A.A. Dowd actually watched this entire film? Because I do wonder if A.A. Dowd thinks that the Superman who quote comes across like a smugly sociopathic deity, unquote. I'm wondering if A.A. Dowd is thinking that the nightmare sequence Superman is actually supposed to be like Superman. Like, does A.A. Dowd understand that Nightmare Superman and the Superman in the present time are the same? I mean, they're the same person, but just different times and different circumstances. But it seems like A.A. Dowd is like putting them together as the exact same thing that we're supposed to be looking at. And it's not at all. It's a different turn of the character that hasn't happened yet, and that was supposed to be given more story for. But I'm a little confused as that's the only thing I can think of for A.A. Dowd to write a smugly sociopathic deity. Maybe A.A. Dowd's talking about the Day of the Dead sequence. But if so, the entire series of moments in that is showing us humanity's view of Superman. It's how we see Superman. It's not so much that Superman is a smugly sociopathic deity. It's what we see when we look at Superman. So if that's the case, if maybe A.A. Dowd's not talking about the nightmare sequence, but maybe about the Day of the Dead sequence, and if so, I think that actually says more about A.A. Dowd than it does about Henry Cavill's Superman. So I don't know. There's no specifics on that, no explanation there. So I'm just assuming. So if I've gotten that wrong, my apologies. But I'm trying to understand what the sociopathic deity is referring to. Also, the quote charismatic decency of Christopher Reeve, unquote. You mean like when he wiped Lois Lane's memory twice without her consent, and one of those times being just to make himself feel better? Is that the charismatic decency that you're talking about? Because I have some issues with that and always have. You know, the one where he's lying to Lois about who he is. Yeah, I have some issues with that. And also the puppyish charm of one-timer Brandon Routh. Are you referring to the deadbeat dad Superman? Is that the Superman you're talking about? Okay, all right, okay. So I'll hop into the chat real quick and see what everybody else is saying here. Andy says, puppyish charm. Listen, I love Brandon Routh in Crisis as Superman, but this Superman in Superman Returns was so freaking creepy that it was insulting to me that this is the Donnerverse. Yeah, and Andy also says, I'm so upset by this review, particular because of this assessment that Superman Returns somehow gave us a smiling, charming Superman as opposed to BVS. Yeah, a lot of people don't, I shouldn't say a lot of people, I hate to generalize people, but there are some people that I've talked to or heard speak about this, that they don't like the Brandon Routh Superman and Superman Returns because he doesn't really, and you can kind of maybe understand why he sort of steps back from being in little Jason's life, but at the same time it's like, come on man, that's your son. um but yeah, he has problems too. He has flaws and problems too. I don't know why it's a problem when just Henry Cavill's Superman does it. So if you liked Brandon Routh's Superman, you would be acknowledging, I think, or you would have to, just if you are being objective, that he has flaws too. Adam says, I've never considered that. Did some people think that the nightmare was set in stone in the flash forward? Yeah, I think some people thought that, like, I mean, it is the same Superman. It's the same guy, but in the nightmare sequence, he's overtaken by the anti-life equation. So he's sort of brainwashed. So it's the same guy, but different circumstances. So yeah, I think that confused some people. These people who write these reviews come across as like, I'm so smart. I write for these major outlets, and then they totally and completely misunderstand the film. So it's just funny to me. Okay, continuing on in the review. Writing, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, Affleck, meanwhile, broods and simmers, but does little new with the dual rich boy crime fighter role, possibly because the movie counts on audiences being so familiar with the Bat mythos that it doesn't need to fill in either his interior or exterior lives, beyond, of course, the upteenth flashback to the Wayne family getting gunned down in the gutter, unquote. I have a hard time understanding the critique that I don't like that the Wayne family that we had to see the Wayne family be murdered again, but the film is too reliant on people knowing about the Bat mythos. You can't have that both ways. That's kind of a contradictory in terms in that paragraph. But A.A. Dowd writes, Affleck, meanwhile, broods and simmers, unquote. So it sounds like to me that A.A. Dowd is recognizing that Ben Affleck just absolutely nailed his portrayal of Batman. That sounds like Batman to me. Uh, but A.A. Dowd also says, does little new with the dual rich boy crime fighter role, unquote. Did Dowd miss the time that Bruce Wayne pretends to be drunk so he can steal from Lex Luthor at a fancy party? Or that time he put on a tux and flirted with Diana Prince? I don't know, that comes across as a rich boy to me, mixed in with the crime fighter stuff. So, I'm still we've gone through this review, and I'm still questioning whether or not A.A. Dowd actually watched the entire film. So maybe we'll figure it out by then. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a mystery we'll never be able to solve. Okay, and then also A.A. Dowd says the umpteenth flashback to the Wayne family getting gunned down in the gutter. Uh, yeah, it's another interpretation of that scene and that moment in time for Bruce, but it's actually the first one to be completely comic book accurate. And to me, in my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful sequences ever put to film. And I'm not even being hyperbolic about that. I genuinely think it's one of the most beautiful sequences ever put to film. So maybe A.A. Dowd just must have forgotten to mention those things. Continuing on, A.A. Dowd writes, quote, this is an airless and humorless superhero movie, but it's never an anonymous one, unquote. I don't exactly know what the anonymous part in there means. I don't think I fully understand this sentence, but in regards to the humorless portion of it, it has plenty of humor. We've talked about that on these live streams. There are plenty of jokes throughout the film. And on top of that, why does a superhero movie need humor? Who says that it has to have any humor at all? Who says that? Where are the rules to that? I think you can actually make a superhero film and not have any humor in it if you wanted to. If that's the story you want to tell and the tone you want to take, fine, go for it. I don't think superhero films need us to have that. I think a lot of times they want us to have that, but they're in no obligation to offer that. Continuing on, quote, much more so than the Batman films of Christopher Nolan, from which Snyder borrows a self seriousness, but not a sense of propulsive excitement. Dawn of Justice aims for some of the exaggerated visual grandeur of actual comics. Our heroes look like Greek gods, towering and massive, with Superman descending from the heavens and out of an Alex Ross painting, perhaps, while Batman basically gets to slip on the boxy, heavy armor he spotted in Frank Miller's seminal dystopian miniseries, The Dark Knight Returns. Unquote. I was wondering when it was going to happen. Got to get that Christopher Nolan mention in here. Uh, for some reason, he was really only an executive producer on BBS and nothing really more. But gotta throw him in there. But I do like this paragraph that it sums up why Batman v Superman is actually a very comic book accurate film. It captures the best in what comic book visuals can offer, and it treats these comic book characters with an elevated level of respect. So I appreciate that part of the paragraph there. So let's continue on. Quote, there are striking images, most notably in a whacked out dream sequence, one of many actually, that feels like a lost passage from Snyder's juvenile pastiche passion project, Sucker Punch, unquote. So, which sequence is A.A. Dowd referring to here? Anybody have a guess? My guess is the nightmare sequence. And if so, it's interesting that Dowd believes it to be a dream sequence. I guess there is that, that idea of, oh, was Bruce just dreaming? He wakes up, but did it really happen? Did it really, did the Flash really come into the Batcave? I can see why somebody would think it was a dream sequence. But even so, if A.A. Dowd thought it was only a dream sequence and it didn't really happen, I think it really happened. But even if it's just a dream sequence, I find it disappointing in terms of professional film criticism that Dowd didn't want to further explore why. Why is that dream sequence in there? I'm telling you, if you want to be a film critic, the best question that you can ask when you're watching a film is to ask yourself why, because that's going to open up so many ways to explore the film. And it's remarkable to me that so many of these quote top critics have done this in these reviews where they've talked about their dream sequences in the film, but they don't actually explore why there are dream sequences in the film. And I've talked about it at length before about how characters repeatedly in the film, it goes through Superman, Batman, Lois Lane. They all have these problems sleeping, or they have nightmares or dream sequences. And there's a reason for those things. They're tied together. And to read a review from a professional film critic who doesn't ask those questions and doesn't explore those things in this particular film, I think it's lazy. I think it means that they are incapable of analyzing story, and possibly, and maybe this is a stretch, I'm not trying to judge these people personally, but if you don't care to explore these kinds of things, I personally don't think you care about film. I'm not convinced that these people actually like what they do for a living, because I happen to enjoy that. Like if I'm digging into a film and asking the why question, it's exciting to me to explore these things and to look at themes and look at repeated instances of things. That to me is way more fun than just saying I like something or I dislike something. It's actually trying to dig into the meaning of what you got out of the film. Also, there's a swipe at Sucker Punch, which tells me that A.A. Dowd didn't take time to analyze that film in any earnest way either. So I don't have a lot of faith that A.A. Dowd is really taking this job of a reviewer seriously. And I hate to say that because I don't mean any ill will. I just don't get that from reading this review that A.A. Dowd either cares about filmmaking or wants to actually look into films in any kind of serious way. To continue on, because I think we've still got a little bit more to go. So I want to just kind of breeze through this and then I'll go back into the chat and look and see what the comments are there. So just hang with me. Dowd writes, quote, just as often, the director proves himself woefully incapable of staging the kind of big bang spectacle his material demands. The film's interminable final act, for example, is an eyesore of CGI combat, the kind of weightless machismo, rock-scored digital spectacle that the filmmaker previously mined from Miller's raw Spartan War saga 300, unquote. I am so shocked that one of the things that these Rotten Tomatoes top critics, including Dowd here, actually want to criticize Zack Snyder for his action sequences. I can't believe this. This is wild to me. One of the things that Zack Snyder is actually known for, one of his trademarks, are that he is great at action sequences. There are people like James Gunn, for instance. Recently came out that James Gunn called Zack Snyder to get his action sequence people on Peacemaker because he needed some really good action sequences. So even filmmakers know that other filmmakers know that Zack Snyder is known for great action sequences. So I just have to say the nerve of these people, the nerve of these critics to try to make that claim in these reviews, especially when the nightmare sequence and the big fight between Batman and Superman and ultimately the fight against Doomsday, they are all fantastic in terms of action sequences and the CGI. Some of that CGI is gonna hold up many years down the road. Some of these superhero films and these CGI effects aren't going to hold up very well in some other films, but I think effects in this film will actually. Um, Snyder makes all of the action sequences exciting, and he actually makes them make sense. Everything has weight, everything has logic to it. And with the help of my man Larry Fong, who I'm a big fan of, and who's one of my cinematography people that I look up to, they produce some of the most beautiful shots in the film, and a lot of those beautiful shots are in those action sequences. They make splash pages come to life. So I'm just like, how can you say that? How can you say that? It's such a strange critique, in my opinion. Continuing on, A. Dowd writes, what Snyder sees in these timeless characters is raw, Herculean power, and little else. He pushes them closer to abstract icons of fascist supremacy than they've possibly ever been pushed, unquote. Okay, fascist supremacy? What in the world? What does this even mean? Because fascist, the definition of that is a tendency towards or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control, basically a dictator. Supremacy means a supreme authority or power. So I don't know what A. Dowd is referring to here. My guess is the nightmare sequence, maybe with the sort of dictator Superman who has all those Superman soldiers. That's the only thing I can think of that might show Superman being the supreme authority and being a dictator in that world. That's the only thing I could think of. A. Dowd very clearly did not understand the nightmare sequence. It's very clear to me now. Continuing on with the review, A. Dowd writes, quote, either paying lip service to or outright ignoring the values they've always stood for, which frankly isn't the end of the world. We can have a scarily remote Superman and a borderline alcoholic Batman, just as we can now have a Gotham never properly established as nothing in this film is, that apparently lies just across the bay from Metropolis. But shouldn't all this geeky property colliding still at least be entertaining? Shouldn't it play to the cheap seats instead of wallowing in the murk, unquote? Okay. Questions. I have them. Why? Why does BVS have to, quote, play to the cheap seats, unquote? There is absolutely no reason it has to. Absolutely none. There is no one who says it has to. I'm not saying that. I don't know that anyone has to say that unless the studio dictates it to be so. But if you're a filmmaker making a film and you're telling a story, just make your film. Tell it the way you want to. The best thing you can do as a filmmaker is tell it from your point of view. I don't understand why these people think that it has to play to the cheap seats, why it has to play to the general public. Who says? A. Dowd, I guess? And who says it's not entertaining? A. Dowd can't speak for anyone else here except for A. Dowd. A. Dowd can only speak for A. Dowd. maybe Dowd didn't find it entertaining, but I sure enough did. I love BBS. I think it's so enjoyable to watch, and I'm entertained every time I watch it. And you know what? I know this is anecdotal, but I know a lot of people who feel that way. I know a lot of people who found BBS very entertaining. So I have lots of questions. Okay, to wrap up this review, here we go. We're in the home stretch. A. Dowd writes, quote, to enjoy Batman v Superman, a blockbuster somehow more boring than it is strange, is to cling for dear life to brief flashes of levity and lunacy. And the most reliable source of both is Eisenberg's nervous motor mouth of a supervillain, granted pages of halting monologue and a musical theme much more playful than the film containing it. The actor's having fun. At least someone is, unquote. My conclusion after reading this, and I kind of feel like this about all these reviews that we've been looking at, is that this is not an analysis of a film. This is just writing about how much it did not cater to what A. Dowd wanted. And I guess maybe you could say that this review played to the cheap seats instead of being a serious critique. So I guess we'll leave it there. And I'm going to adjust my headphones because sometimes it does it because I have a tiny head. Hang on just a second and I will adjust my headphones. Sometimes because of the small size of my head, my headphones can't be tight enough to go around it. So sometimes it makes my hair do crazy things. So I appreciate everyone's patience in that. So I'm going to hop into the chat to see if anybody has anything to say. And Andy says, I am one of those people who enjoyed it. It is one of the best movies of my lifetime. You know what? I agree. I think it's one of my top films, not just comic book or superhero films. It's just a great film. So I agree with that. Well, I guess that's going to do it for this week's live stream. Went a little longer than I wanted to, but boy, we had a lot to dig into with this one. So if you did miss this live, I hope you'll watch it in the replay on my YouTube channel, and I hope you'll consider sharing your thoughts in the comment section below. If you have any questions about when I'll be live, check this YouTube channel because I'll be scheduling those streams in advance when I am available. I need to do that for February. I'm real proud of myself. I was very consistent in January, so hopefully that'll be the case. I'm going to try to schedule them monthly, so hopefully I'll have them at least scheduled throughout the month when I'm available to do them, so you'll be able to see when I'm going to be available. So just know that they'll be available, and just click the get reminder if you want to know when I'm gonna be live. And as always, if you have a BVS review that you think is great and you'd like to share it with the class, please leave a link in the comments below, and I'll share them in future videos because, we talk about some of the ways in which some of these reviews are not great and don't add a lot of value to us as the readers and as people who watch BVS. But maybe somebody who did a great job with a review and you want to share it. I think it's important to look at the ones who do a good job, to learn from those as well. Also, if you're interested, I am raising money for the Breast Cancer Foundation, Research Foundation of Alabama. I am a breast cancer survivor myself, so this is pretty important to me. So if you do want to donate, don't feel obligated to. You definitely don't have to. But if you would like to donate and participate in that, there is a link in the video description below. And there's also a donate button on my YouTube channel homepage. So if you would like to do that, it's going to go towards research. It's not going to just impact people in Alabama. There will be research that goes out in the broader world, but this is specific to my location. So if you want to participate in that, I would appreciate anything you could give, but just consider it if you are able to donate. And if you do, thank you in advance for your support. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with me. And I guess I'm going to, at this point, hand it over to voiceover Rebecca, and I'm going to let her wrap up this live stream. If you would like to see more of these live streams, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod. If you'd like to keep in touch with me personally, you can follow me on Instagram at the Derby Kid and on Vero at Derby Kid. You can hear my thoughts on the CW Supergirl TV series and all things Kara Zor-El over at Supergirl Radio by visiting supergirlradio.com, subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, or subscribing to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/DCTV Podcasts. Also, please check out the Justice League Universe podcast for in-depth analysis on the DCEU films, including Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And before I go, I hope that this live stream video series will inspire you to think more critically and thoughtfully about film and storytelling. I'd like to leave you with this quote from C.S. Lewis's book titled An Experiment in Criticism. The truth is not that we need the critics in order to enjoy the authors, but that we need the authors to enjoy the critics. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I love Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. And I am publishing a series of videos exploring the reasons why I am such a fan of Zack Snyder's film. In this series, you'll find my thoughts on topics that matter to me, like Larry Fong's cinematography, character analysis on Lex Luthor and Lois Lane, the Christian imagery, what I find hopeful about the movie, and yes, I'll address the critical reception. So, if you're interested in any of those topics, I hope you will get something out of this series and find out why Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice has had such a profound, heartfelt, and inspiring impact on my life.